Happy Saturday afternoon, everybody. And I am today behind our property, and I guess on the south side, and you can see down the bottom there, if you look carefully, you can see the creek flowing down in the valley behind our property. And what you're seeing in the foreground is the remnants of a couple of trees, and I'm going to pan here, and then I'm going to do a little bit of walking and talking at the same time. More of what's going on around us and less of me today as far as seeing me. But you may remember back in 2022, September the 24th to be exact, and you'll notice we still have a little bit of snow left on the edges here. It's mostly gone, but there's still a little bit from time to time. Anyways, back on September the 24th, 2022, Nova Scotia was the victim of a powerful storm, the remnants of Hurricane Fiona. And what they said was that it was over 150 kilometer winds, the worst hurricane cyclone type storm that Canada has ever seen as far as anything hitting land, I guess you could say. So what you don't often hear about, when you hear about all these hurricanes that happen throughout the United States, you see the devastation, and you hear about what happens, buildings get flattened, roofs get torn off, but you don't often hear about the rebuild of what happens after the hurricane takes place, except maybe with the exception of, I think it was Hurricane Katrina, going back a number of years, that hit landfall, and we used to hear about the fundraising and building and rebuilding that was taking place. But what I wanted to show you today, here we are just shy of 7 months. I think we're a week short of 7 months from when it happened. And I'm walking along here and showing you, the road behind here is called New Road 2. How original. That's New Road 2. And along here, this road was completely impassable at one point. You could not drive down this road because of the devastation of trees. So I'm going to pan over to this side here, and there's trees down over here. This area here, when you look, it's still spring, so there's not a lot of leaves on the trees yet. This area was hit hard, but there were a lot of areas that were hit even harder than us. And I think what I want to sort of give you an update on is a lot of the damage that took place wasn't so much personal damage to houses or sheds or barns, though there were houses that had roofs torn off, and some of us lost power for as long as 2 weeks or more. We were one of those families that did. But we were very fortunate. We didn't have any property damage done by the storm to our property because of the way our property is situated. Any of the trees that fell didn't land on our property. See, there's a downed spruce tree right there. And all of the damage was in the forested area, which is part of our property to the east, and there were a couple of trees off on the west side. But I think it's important to emphasize here that the damage that took place, the man-made damage, they're still trying to fix. And what they've started to do along the roads here in Nova Scotia is they do a process called mulching, and they have this big grinding wheel on the end of an excavator that grinds the trees back from the road that have been that were knocked over or fell during the storm. See, there's some more. So that they're not causing any problems with hydro lines. And yes, we still do have hydro lines above ground here in Nova Scotia, Canada. One person commented on my first video about the hurricane from the States that they were surprised that we still had hydro lines above ground. But everything is so rural out in the area that we're in that they haven't gotten to the point of putting anything underground yet. And I think, now don't quote me on this, but I think I had heard on the radio that they were still trying to aim for a target of 2030, but actually this storm may have put them behind for getting hydro lines underground so that we don't have problems with power outages and trees landing on wires. Anyways, man-made buildings, things that can be fixed within a relatively short time, a couple of years in some cases. I know there's a backlog for roofs being done, but the devastation that we're seeing here in Nova Scotia is a lot different than perhaps what some of the other hurricanes have shown, and I'm sure other states have the same problems we do. But what we're seeing here, and this is our first storm like this, so we're new at this, is devastation like this with trees down. And what I was told by someone who worked at one point in the forest industry, who was a passenger on my bus, he said that the amount of damage that has occurred here in Nova Scotia, it is going to take probably 75 years before Nova Scotia forests will be back to the way they were before September 24th, 2022, the date of the storm. And I mean, 75 years, I'll be somewhere between 120 and 130 at that point. I don't think I'm going to live to see that. Maybe my children will see it. And we haven't been out here in Nova Scotia that long, but the face of the forests around here changed so drastically that it's beyond comprehension, the amount of damage that's taken place. And I think you have to keep in mind too is that we have excuse me, a lot of wildlife out in this area that have been uprooted and are coming out into populated areas because of storm damage. Fortunately, along here, you're seeing, spruce trees. This is my property along the edge here, and most of the trees along here are still intact and are doing okay. There's some damage here. This part here is actually the base of the property that's adjacent to ours, and they've got some work to do to fix that. It's just there's no house on that property. And going further up here, there's an opening to my property, and you'll see that there's some trees down along here that we've started to take care of. But this is something that's been going on, and because of the timing of the storm, not everyone was able to work on their properties all year round, or at least all through the winter. So they're starting to do the work now, but here's a tree down. And just to give you an idea, I mean, look at this here. We have a number of trees on the property that are like this, uprooted from the ground. And that's how powerful these winds were here in Nova Scotia. I got a couple of piles out here that need to be burned at some point. And then over there, let's zoom in over here. We had a couple of trees down that have since been cut back a little bit. But the rest of the property, you can see my tree line is far, far, far from the house. The rest of my property is pretty good. So we were quite pleased about that, but we were fortunate compared to some other people. Anyways, I wanted to give you that little bit of an update about what's going on in Nova Scotia post Hurricane Fiona and the rebuilding that's going to eventually take place, and the regrowth of trees and the I guess the uprooting of wildlife that has had to come out. We see deer in our property a lot, coming in and eating off the grass and eating some of the apples that have fallen from our trees. But yeah, that's an update on Hurricane Fiona information from September. Here we are in April, and I hope you enjoyed and perhaps learned a little bit about what happens after a hurricane, or what happened here in Nova Scotia after a hurricane. Have a wonderful weekend, and stay healthy and be good to each other. Like and subscribe.